On behalf of the Community Alliance for Peace and Justice, we are honored to welcome Dr. Syed Mohammad Marandi, Professor of English Literature and Orientalism at the University of Tehran and one of Iran's most prominent public intellectuals and foreign policy voices. We are recording this conversation at a pivotal moment, 82 days into a war imposed on Iran by the US and Israel. Today, we want to explore this conflict from Iran's perspective, its red lines in the ongoing negotiations, its relationships with neighbors and adversaries, the war's impact on sectarian divides, and Iran's vision for what comes next. Dr. Marandi, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you very much for having me. It's a great pleasure.
So, Dr. Marandi, let's begin with the fast-moving developments on the ground. There are currently reports that significant diplomatic progress has been made and that a declaration of principles may be announced very soon to lay the groundwork for negotiations on a range of issues after the Eid holidays. However, there are others who believe this is just a ruse and that the US could attack Iran within the next 48 hours. From where you stand, which of the two possibilities is more likely?
I think it's much more likely that the United States will attack Iran within the next 2, 3 days. And the gap between Iran and the Trump regime and Netanyahu is quite big. And I don't think that the United States is able to fill that gap because the Israeli regime and the Zionist lobby simply won't allow it.
Sure. So you don't believe that the US is capable of acting independent of Israeli pressure when it comes to Iran?
No, not in today's world. Maybe in the future, as people continue to wake up to the reality of what's going on in the United States and who truly is in charge, maybe in the years to come, things will change. But at the moment, the Zionist lobby is definitely very much in control. We saw in Joe Kent's resignation letter, the head of counterterrorism, a Trump appointee, he said that this war is all about the Israeli lobby and the Israeli regime. And I don't think much has changed in the last couple of months.
So do you believe that the goals that Israel has, I mean, they're completely divergent from the US goals. Do you believe that Trump wants an end to the war and Israel is not allowing it? And what do you think is Israel's ultimate goal emerging from this conflict?
Yes, I think the interest of the United States is not war. It's this war has harmed the United States uh, in a very big way, perhaps in an unprecedented way. We've seen neocons, public figures among the neocons, admit that this is perhaps the greatest defeat of the United States. And this is basically because the Zionist regime has imposed this on the American people. But I believe that Trump is incapable of uh, seeking out an off-ramp, and therefore, uh, due to the insistence of the Israeli regime, the United States will enter another round of war. And what the Israeli regime wants is supreme uh, uh, power. It wants to have total control over West Asia and parts of North Africa. And Iran is the only thing that stands in its way, the only country that supports the Palestinian people in a meaningful way is Iran, of course, Yemen too, but aside from Yemen, it's just Iran. And so, therefore, if the Israeli regime succeeds in turning into Iran into another Syria, as they succeeded in doing, then that would be the golden opportunity that they've been seeking for many, many years.
Sure. So now, when it comes to negotiations, Dr. Marandi, the two big issues are Iran's nuclear program and also the Strait of Hormuz. On the nuclear issue, it is being reported that Iran's supreme leader, Ayatollah Mustafa Khamenei, has just issued a directive saying Iran's stockpile of highly enriched uranium cannot leave Iran. Is that a red line for Iran, or is down blending under IAEA supervision also a viable option?
Well, this is nothing new, and in any case, regardless of the credibility of this particular piece of information or not, Reuters, whenever they uh, speak of unnamed sources, or the New York Times, uh, no one should trust them. Reuters is particularly dishonest when it comes to Iran. But the Iranians have said already, this is not new. They've been saying it for many weeks now, that Iran will not send its enriched uranium abroad. Iran's right to have a nuclear enrichment program uh, it exists within the framework of international law. Iran is not going to forsake that right under duress. And in addition to that, Iran's sovereignty over the Strait of Hormuz is also something that it will not relinquish either. The Strait of Hormuz is not an international waterway. It is a um, an area that is the water is owned by Iran and Oman,
Right.
and these are the two countries, therefore, that have to decide on uh, how to control the strait. Before the war, Iran had no intention of controlling it. But after the Persian Gulf was used by the United States and Persian Gulf regimes like Qatar and the Emirates and Saudi Arabia and Bahrain and um, Kuwait, after they allowed the United States to attack Iran and use their territory to do so and slaughter thousands of Iranians, the Iranians have decided that they will control the strait in order to prevent the United States from, in future, turning the Persian Gulf into a foothold for aggression again.
Sure. Just one last question, but then I'll turn it over to Atika. And that is, so you believe that a U.S. attack is imminent, but can you also confirm that there is progress happening simultaneously, um, diplomatically as well, that there is progress around negotiations?
I doubt that there's any significant progress being made at the negotiating table. And I would also remind your audience that a year ago, almost a year ago, when the United States and the Israeli regime launched their 12-day war against Iran, a previous war, beforehand, we also heard that Trump and Netanyahu had differences over what to do with Iran, and now we're hearing the same thing. So that was fake news. This is fake news, and we are prepared for war. That doesn't mean that it is inevitable, but it means that it is highly likely. And the gap is large because the United States is an empire and it refuses to respect Iran's sovereignty. And for Iran, the revolution was all about sovereignty, independence, dignity, honor. And that is why Iran supports the Palestinian cause. That's why Iran supports the people of Cuba. That's why Iran supported the resistance in apartheid South Africa. And these are the reasons why the United States has always been hostile towards Iran. But the Palestinian issue is something that is more important than anything else for the Americans. They support ethno-supremacism, and Iran stands against it, and thus Iran is guilty.
Professor Marandi, thank you so much for joining us. So I would like to ask you about the axis of resistance. And, I've roots, my background is such that I'm connected very much with the region. I've even visited Iran, many years ago with my family. So how do you see this axis of resistance evolving? Because US Central Command said that they've been able to cut off, so quote unquote, the supply line between Iran and the rest of its allies, namely the Hezbollah and the Houthis and Hamas. And the current government of Syria and Lebanon, which are considered to be as puppet regimes by many with their alignment towards the Zionist empire. how does, at this juncture, the election of Ali al-Zaidi, or the nomination of Ali al-Zaidi in Iraq, which, according, if I'm not wrong, Al Jazeera quoted as the compromise candidate, because Trump had he had reportedly exercised coercion by threatening to freeze Iraq's funds. So how is this axis of resistance evolving in the next few days?
You're absolutely correct. In Iraq, the United States, ever since Saddam Hussein foolishly invaded Kuwait, and of course, it was immoral, just like his invasion of Iran, it gave the United States the opportunity to impose sanctions and through the UN, and the Iraqis are still suffering as a result. And the United States has a stranglehold over the Iraqi economy, even though it is exporting, or has been exporting, millions of barrels of oil a day. But Iraq is complicated. The situation there is complicated. The government of Iraq, the people of Iraq, have close relations with Iran, but at the same time, as you rightly point out, the Americans have Iraq by the throat. So there is a complicated relationship, but the resistance in Iraq is strong. And we saw during the 39 days of fighting that they were an effective force. My understanding is that this time around they will become even more active, significantly more active than last time around. Syria, as you rightly pointed out, from the very beginning in 2011, the dirty war, when it began, the objective was to control Syria and to prevent Iran from supporting the resistance in Lebanon, but also the resistance in Palestine, because a lot of Iranian support would go from the Mediterranean to Gaza, and also from Syria to Jordan to the West Bank, of course, underground. And the Americans, through the dirty war and the foolishness of U.S. proxies in the region and NATO, they ultimately succeeded in destroying Syria and bringing about an al-Qaeda government, which is a puppet government of the United States. That has made things much more difficult for the resistance, without a doubt. But we do see that Hezbollah has been performing extraordinarily well in the past few weeks in beating back the Israeli regime in southern Lebanon. The regime, in revenge, it bombs families and apartment blocks and slaughters women and children in their rage because Hezbollah is effectively hitting their military personnel. Yemen, I think if the war begins, you'll see it play a very prominent role. The reason why during the 39 days of fighting, Yemen did not play much of a role is because the resistance wanted to manage the war, and they didn't want to go up the escalation ladder too swiftly. The Iranians also pulled punches during the war because it did not want the war to escalate too far. It wanted to manage the escalation. But the assumption is that if there is another war in the next few days, the next 2-3 days, that it will be very brutal, and that the United States and the Israeli regime will be targeting Iranian critical infrastructure and targeting ordinary Iranians. And in response, I think that Iran and the axis of resistance will move up the escalation ladder very, very quickly.
All right. So that brings us to the other regional allies, which is the Sunni states, predominantly the Saudis and Gulf, which we have known very well and recognized during this war that they've accommodated the U.S.-Israeli campaign against Iran and have been supportive of it. But lately we saw a change in direction between the Saudis and the Gulf states, which is where Saudis are supposedly giving a posture of trying to reconcile or back off of the act of war or aggression against Iran, whereas the UAE stands very openly with its in terms of its relationship with Israel. So do you see a positive movement going forward between the regional states? And is that contingent upon decolonization, as you have mentioned number of times, as the US base is moving out of the region? And a second part to that question, which is just to address, given your knowledge of the history of the region, the striking thing that we have witnessed during this conflict is the Sunni population within Southeast Asia and within the Gulf states aligning with Iran or supporting Iran in terms of the way they have reacted to foreign aggression. And do you think this has genuinely weakened that divide, which has been used as a power play by many of these countries it has adversely affected our population, and particularly the Shia genocides that have been carried out? I've witnessed that myself in Pakistan also.
One of my old friends who passed away, who was a leading Islamic figure in the UK and who had his roots in Pakistan, was the late Kalim Siddiqui. And he told me that as a child in Pakistan, that people didn't even know that they were Shia or Sunni. And he didn't know, his family didn't know, and they commemorated Muharram and Ashura and the martyrdom of Imam Hussein and the role that his wife, his sister Zainab played in this revolution alongside everyone else. And Sunnis and Shia were in this, commemorated this every year together. But that after the revolution in Iran, these oil and rich Saudi Arabia in particular, at the behest of the United States as well, but also in order to preserve the ruling family, began to promote Wahhabism, Salafism, and Takfiri ideology, basically to create divide across the region and to contain the revolution and to preserve their family dictatorships. Sort of not so dissimilar to what happened in the Arab Spring. We saw that in the Arab Spring, all the energy was directed ultimately towards Libya and Syria, the only two countries that had a problem with the Western Empire, and all the reactionary regimes were funding these operations, and they, of course, did not experience upheaval in the Persian Gulf region. So sectarianism was not promoted because these are Sunni regimes. These are sort of like they're the Epstein class in their own way. In fact, some of these people are in the Epstein files in the Persian Gulf region. So they use Sunni Islam as a tool in order to legitimize their own rule, and in order to create divide and rule. And they've been effective to a very large degree for decades. And we also see that used by Erdogan as well. Turkey, which traditionally has had a strong Sufi culture under President Erdogan, especially since the dirty war in Syria, he's moved more towards Takfiri groups and Takfiri ideology. So the West, the empire, has been successful in dividing the region based on religion or race or sect, and to a large degree. But I think that in this war, we've seen people see right through this. And there are multiple reasons. One is, I think Gaza has changed a lot of things. And for 2.5 years, people across the region and across the globe saw that these regimes, whether in Ankara or in the Persian Gulf region or Egypt, none of them did anything to help the Palestinian people. None of them broke off political ties. None of them broke off economic ties. Turkey continues to transport oil from the regime in Azerbaijan, which is a Shia country, but it's just as complicit in this genocide as everyone else, because they too have very good relations with the Israeli regime. They provide the energy that the Israeli regime uses to slaughter Palestinians, and more recently, the Lebanese families and children. So, but after Gaza, I think people began to increasingly see who really supports the Palestinians and who doesn't, and that this is not a Shia, Sunni, Arab, Persian, Muslim, Christian, Jewish issue. It is something where Christians, many Jews, increasingly many young Jews and Muslims from all different backgrounds, uh, they agree upon, and they are all angry that the regimes in this region have been looking away, and instead they've been carrying out business as usual. And so they've seen that the Iranians, Hezbollah, Ansarullah in Yemen, and increasingly the resistance in Iraq have been the only forces that have been supporting the Palestinian people. Of course, only forces meaning government or militant organizations like Hezbollah or governments like the Ansarullah-led government in Yemen or the resistance in Iraq. And no one else is supporting them except for civil society groups across the world, where we've seen people in the hundreds of thousands at times take to the streets from Australia to Spain and so on. But sadly not in the Arab world. But the point is that people see through this now, and that is why not only do you see Muslims in West Asia and North Africa cheering for Iran as it strikes these regimes in retaliation, because at the end of the day, these regimes were complicit in the war. They allowed the United States to use their territory, their bases, their airspace, their land, their sea to kill Iranians. And so when Iran would retaliate, we saw that except for Takfiris like the Salafis and the Wahhabis, everyone else, or almost everyone else, was cheering for Iran. But it's not just Muslims. It's been the case across the global majority and even a significant number of people in the West. And that is because they now see through the propaganda. For decades, we've had anti-Iranian propaganda, anti-Palestinian propaganda, anti-Hezbollah propaganda, and people are seeing through that, whether in the region or beyond. That people no longer believe the narratives put forward either by the oil and gas-rich regimes in the region or by Western countries or powers that are controlled by the Epstein class.
Yeah. But do you see the Saudis offering this as an honest or sincere offer towards ending the war and reconciliation? Or is this just another, facade, and in the background, as you mentioned, another attack may be imminent towards Iran?
I don't think that the Saudis have the capability to stand up to the United States, even if they wanted to, which is unclear. But the same is true about all the other countries. Turkey under Erdogan, they are simply it's a NATO regime, and during this war, Turkey allowed NATO to gather intelligence against Iran through AWACS jets that constantly flew over the country, and they allowed the U.S. to use its bases in Turkey to gather intelligence. And of course, they transported oil from the Republic of Azerbaijan to the Israeli regime. Jordan played a pivotal role. The airspace and the air bases in Jordan were used by the Americans. Radar installations were used there to help protect the Israeli regime. The same is true with Saudi Arabia and all of them. So none of these countries have shown themselves to be sovereign, independent, or having the will to take a stand against the Israeli regime and against the empire. And the irony is that if you go back and look at Tucker Carlson's interview with the U.S. ambassador to the Israeli regime, yes,
Mike Huckabee.
in that interview, Huckabee says that if the Israelis take the region, that's fine. And the countries that would be affected are Turkey, Jordan, Saudi Arabia, Iraq, Egypt, not Iran and not Yemen.
Right. Correct.
But ironically, the only two countries, alongside the resistance in Iraq and in Lebanon, that are willing to take a stand to protect the Palestinian people, to support the Palestinian people, and to prevent Zionist expansionism are these countries that will not be directly affected if, God forbid, the regime was able to expand.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you so much, Dr. Marandi. So I guess it's safe to say that Iran is currently not taking the non-aggression pact that Saudi Arabia had sort of reached out with very seriously. And you can respond to that. But I do have a question about Pakistan. Pakistan has positioned itself as a mediator in this conflict and appears to be one of the few countries both Washington and Tehran are willing to engage with in that role. At the same time, Pakistan does maintain a defense pact with Saudi Arabia and has recently sent 8,000 troops, J-17 fighter jets, and also additional deployments there. How does Iran view Pakistan's defense ties with Saudi Arabia in the current context of the war?
Well, Iran has a very long history, cultural history with Pakistan. The Pakistani national anthem is, of course, in the Persian language.
Mm.
Iqbal is a major literary figure in Iran who you will read in school textbooks. So the cultural, religious uh, link between the two countries is very deep. And so when we went to Pakistan for the negotiations, the day and a half that we spent there, the Pakistani people treated the Iranian delegation as heroes. Wherever the delegation went, whether it was in the hotel or on the streets uh, or in the media center, they were treated as heroes, even though they didn't even know who these individuals were. They just knew that it was the Iranian delegation. So the bond between Iran and Pakistan is quite strong. Now, the Americans wanted Pakistan to be the mediator, and they had their own reasons. Uh, Iran accepted for its own reasons, but Iran is not concerned, it's not worried about the Pakistani relationship with Saudi Arabia. The Iranians have been very clear that if Saudi Arabia or the Kuwaitis or the Bahrainis or the Qataris or the Emiratis, if they allow their territory to be used against Iran, they are a part of the war. And they are complicit in the murder of Iranians, Iranian children, and the destruction of Iranian infrastructure. And they participated in that war. And they even assisted the United States by funding those bases because they pay for everything in all of the bases in the Persian Gulf region. All of the expenses that are paid for by these governments, especially the Saudis and the Emiratis and Qatar. So Iran will, if the Saudis allow their territory to be used against Iran, the Iranians will definitely retaliate as they did before, and that will be inevitable. Hopefully, there is an easy solution, and that is for these five family dictatorships to gather together and issue a statement saying we will not allow the United States to use our territory against our neighbor, unlike what they did during the past few weeks. But I find that very difficult to believe, which is a sort of response to the question asked earlier about the non-aggression pact. And it is somewhat ironic that during the last 47 years since the revolution, this aggression has always been one-sided. They supported the United States pushed Saddam Hussein to invade Iran, and then U.S. proxies in the region, these five family dictatorships, paid Saddam Hussein hundreds of billions of dollars. Then, imagine how much it would be in today's dollars, to create a chemical weapons program, to fund the military machine, and to slaughter Iranians. So they worked with the Americans in the 1980s. That was the first war against Iran. During the 12-day war, they again assisted the United States and the Israeli regime because all of the radar installations in all of these bases were used to help the Israelis, both defensively and offensively, and the Americans. And then, of course, in this war. So they have, for 47 years, been actively helping in carrying out military assaults on the Iranian people. So they're not really in a position to complain about anything. And if this time around the Americans do indeed go for, and the Israeli regime go for Iran's critical infrastructure, as they have threatened, then the critical infrastructure of these countries will be destroyed in retaliation, which will force people to leave because these tiny countries, they are now entering the summer season. It is extremely hot in the Persian Gulf. It is extremely humid in the Persian Gulf. And without electricity, it's just impossible for people to stay. Everyone will have to get in their cars and travel across the desert to Oman or to Iraq, and those countries will collapse.
Sure. Dr. Marandi, you mentioned earlier that the Americans wanted Pakistan to be involved for their reasons. Could you list what those reasons are?
Well, I don't want to go into great detail about this particular issue, but the Pakistani government has traditionally had a very, very close relationship with the United States. Together, they carried out the dirty war against the Soviet Union. Pakistani intelligence had a huge role to play in allowing Al-Qaeda to grow there with Saudi money. But of course, behind the scenes for the British and American intelligence. And the Pakistani Minister of Defense, if you recall, I think last year in an interview, I think on Sky News, actually told the host that, for decades we've been doing your dirty work and complaining about it, which I found very striking. But they helped create the Taliban. The Taliban, of course, now has very poor relations with Pakistan, something which Iran is very concerned about and hopes that this is resolved. While Iran has very major differences with the Taliban, but the Taliban today is less extreme than what it was when the Americans and the Saudis and the Pakistani intelligence helped them to take the country where they carried out major massacres. It is different, although our differences are enormous, especially on different issues, but in particular about girls not being allowed to go to school. That's for us unacceptable. But in any case, they are the reality on the ground, and Iran prefers Afghanistan not to be occupied by the United States. Prefers no country to be occupied, none of the countries in the region to have a U.S. military presence, because for Iran, that is the worst thing that can happen to the region or any region. So Pakistan, the government, has a very close relationship with the United States. And that for Iran has always been a problem for understandable reasons. But again, because of the cultural and historical ties between Iran and Pakistan, the Iranians would not say no to mediation from a country which is so close to Iran culturally and in spirit.
Right. And those relations have grown even more close since Trump came to power, as you know. So, absolutely. So I do want to shift gears just a little bit, Dr. Marandi, and sort of speak about, internally what's happening within the U.S. Just 2 days ago, the U.S. Senate advanced a war powers resolution to block President Trump from further strikes on Iran, with 4 Republicans joining Democrats in support. At the same time, Trump's approval ratings, as you know, are abysmally low. There is visible unease within his own party about the war, and midterm elections, as you know, are also approaching. Does Iran actively factor America's internal divisions and political pressures into its own decision making? And does it view a politically weakened Trump as a more dangerous and unpredictable negotiating partner, or as an opportunity?
That's a very difficult question for me to ask, and I'll try not to answer it because I don't know how to exactly respond to it. Um, what I can say is that Iran does follow closely what goes on in the United States. As you can imagine, Iranians know much more about the United States than the United States knows about Iran. And that's not unique to Iran, of course. I think in general, countries across the world know more about the United States than the United States knows about them. But in any case, Iranian decision makers follow the news in the United States. They know what is going on in the Senate and the House. Of course, this will be vetoed by Trump in any case, but it is significant that opposition within the political establishment is growing and opposition among ordinary Americans is growing, and that the war is having a very negative impact on the American people. How that will play out, though, I don't know. I don't think Iran considers Trump to be a negotiating partner at all. And so I don't think that there is any expectations that we'll have some sort of meaningful deal with such a person. The contempt for Trump is extraordinary here. He's murdered many thousands of Iranians, hundreds of little girls, 180 little girls at the elementary school in Minab, along with their teachers and school staff. And the United States continues to deny responsibility to Trump even tried to blame the Iranians and say that the Iranians fired Tomahawk missiles, which they don't have at these schools. But in any case, at this school. But I don't know if he would be more dangerous, or if he would, or if it would push him in a different direction because he is so unpredictable. So I don't want to go too much into that. But for Iran to calculate what is behind Iran's calculations is that our sovereignty must be respected. And Iran is, in this respect, a country that is probably unique in the world. It is a country that is fiercely independent, and it's willing to go to war to defend its sovereignty. And we've seen that happen twice in less than a year. And it is, I can't say prepared for a third war because I consider this to be a continuation of an ongoing war, but it is prepared for another military assault, a bloody assault to defend that sovereignty. So whether Trump becomes cornered or becomes more dangerous, or whether Trump falls like the Pharaoh, Ayatollah Khamenei, the martyr, he compared Trump to the Pharaoh, shortly before he was martyred. But however this plays out, for Iran, what is important is its sovereignty, its dignity, and the fact that the Palestinian people cannot be forsaken. Iran will not forsake the Palestinian people, regardless how this plays out. And we may experience very, very painful days and weeks ahead, but we're confident that we will pass through this critical moment and emerge stronger.
Sure. Just one last question, Dr. Marandi, before I pass it over to Atika. And that is, have you been surprised by the massive support that Iranian officials, academics, and cultural voices have gained among ordinary Americans on social media during this entire crisis? And if Iran could deliver one clear, direct message to the American public right now, what would it be?
I don't know how closely Iranians are following this. I'm not well informed about this myself. I have heard this from some friends and some quarters that Iran has gained popularity among segments of American society. And that is because I think after Gaza, as I said earlier, many things gradually changed. And Iran, which has been demonized for 47 years, people are beginning to ask, well, if Iran is so bad, why is it this evil country that kills women and beats it and murders people, as they say in the West all the time, and slaughters? And why is it the only country that's opposed to ethno-supremacism and genocide in Gaza? And if the West is so good, then why are all of them the regimes collectively supporting ethnic cleansing and genocide. And so those narratives on Iran have slowly collapsed. And I would advise your viewers, as I've said elsewhere, to read books on Iran, but not many of the books on Iran written in the West are not worth reading. But one very good book is called Going to Tehran by Flint and Hilary Mann Leverett, who worked in the White House, both academics, and whose views on Iran evolved. And they wrote a very good book. And actually, in a way, they predicted the situation that we're in today, because they said if the United States, first of all, they dealt with many of the myths about Iran. And then they basically said that if the United States does not change its course, that we will end up where we are now. So, and they were correct. The United States, when they wrote this book, U.S. officials, policymakers, think tankers, attacked these two very decent people, one husband and wife, one Jewish, one Christian, one Catholic, but they demonized them, they marginalized them, but they were absolutely correct. And I would advise people to read that book among other books. But I think
we did invite them many, many years ago.
Seriously, well, they're very good people.
They are, yeah.
I've had the honor of meeting both of them. But I think it's not surprising that so many people across the world support Iran and in the United States, because I believe that in general, if human beings are informed, if they do, or if they are able to obtain information, then most people will choose what is right. The problem that we have in the world today is that information has been monopolized for since before I was born, and the empire has been able to create narratives, and those narratives have been influential across the world. How so? For example, as an Iranian, if I want to learn about Pakistan, I learn it from books written in the West. If I want to read about Niger, if I find a book, it is most probably written by a Western academic, published by a Western publishing company, and probably think tanks and money is usually involved, because to have the incentive to sit down and write these books, you often need funding and assistance, and so the empire provides that. So my views on Niger are, Eurocentric.
Okay.
My views on Pakistan are Eurocentric. My views on China or on Brazil or South Africa, they're very much influenced by Western narratives. And even my views about my own country, whether I'm Iranian or Pakistani or Iraqi or Moroccan, they too are influenced by the same narratives, because I learn about myself often from Western sources. So there is the colonization of our minds, whether it's linked to our own land or the rest of the world, is a major problem. But I do believe that since Gaza, many things have changed. Mistrust or distrust towards Western media, towards Western institutions of power have grown, and an interest in alternative media. Not all alternative media is any good, but many alternative media outlets have played a very important role in creating awareness, despite the censorship and despite the fact that big tech is controlled. But the world has changed, and the images of dying children in Gaza and Lebanon every day that we see every day, and we continue to see every day, that has created an awareness, an awakening that may not be reversible for the empire.
Professor Marandi, in the interest of time, I'm just going to compress the last two questions and comments, and they are near and dear to me because fortunately, I've had the background where I've been, had interactions with people who are labeled ayatollahs or mad mullahs, as the West like to call them. But just bringing that into the prospect, we seem to be heading towards a new age where, it's as Dr. Galibaf said, the global South is the new age, where we are kind of seeing an end of the imperial empire and heading officially towards a multipolar world, where Iran has played a central role. And as a narrative, as you've pointed out, the West has predominantly been responsible for declaring Iran a pariah state. But I've had the opportunity to read the constitution, and I know Ayatollah Bahishti was a main driver force in that, and he is a poet philosopher. I've listened to him, I've read some of the text. So the word Ayatollah just kind of creates a derogatory or antagonistic, profile when you look at them, and that's not how they are. And so if you read the Constitution, you see that it explicitly enshrines economic autonomy, free education, scientific and research development, which is completely contradictory to what Talibanization or extremism kind of portrays, where you don't have human rights, don't have women, freedom to educate women. And those who have visited Iran kind of see it, as you've said, for what it really is, instead of the Western portrayal. So at this point in history, how do you see Iran's past, present, and future align with its ideology? And how would you respond to the claim that the Islamic Revolution has curtailed Iran's potential as a country and its progress as a country, so as to say?
I think the very fact that Iran has stood up to a superpower and has fought a war and defended itself in 2 wars in less than a year, and has defeated the superpower on the battlefield against all odds. No one outside of no country, no government across the world, even governments friendly to Iran, expected Iran to come out on top. I think many in Iran believed that we would succeed. And many of Iran's friends outside of Iran who understood Iran, but governments across the world thought this would be over in days. And the reason why Iran was so powerful was because of the Islamic Republic of Iran has a high degree of legitimacy, contrary to what they always like to say in the West. And because it has been very effective under sanctions in pushing the country forward. Its defense capabilities have been exposed for everyone to see. Have been revealed for everyone to see. The genius of Iranian military planners is something that will be discussed in war colleges in decades to come. And the resilience of the Iranian people going to the streets and supporting the state and the armed forces during the most difficult times in Iran's history, when the leader was the first to be martyred alongside many, many little girls in Minab. And Ayatollah Khamenei, in his martyrdom, actually has itself served to weaken the Western narrative on with regards to the word Ayatollah, because it was constantly claimed that he was in a bunker or hidden somewhere, and it turned out that he was at home and he refused to leave because he said that many ordinary Iranians have nowhere to go and they will be stuck at home, and I'm not going to move. And that is something that when people discovered that, it created an enormous wave of support among those who in the past were influenced by anti-Iranian narratives or anti-religious narratives. Of course, now the Iranians are very careful to make sure that their leaders are not assassinated by the United States. But even if they are, the Constitution has the answers, and Iran will continue to resist. I think there's a very strong component of social justice in the ideology that dominates in Iran. And there's also another good book it's an old book, but I still think it's a very useful read, written by Alistair Crook, called Resistance, the Essence of the Islamic Revolution, maybe something like that. but it's a book worth reading. Social justice, justice in general, that is a key component, and that is why actually under this after the revolution in Iran, women one of the first things that happened was to move the country towards universal education, and especially women. In the villages, only 4%, if I'm not mistaken, people can look this up, but before the revolution, only 4% of women in villages had knew how to read or write, and well under 50%, under 50% of Iranians could read and write, and the percentage of women was significantly higher. Overwhelmingly, university students were male, but after the revolution, we saw that reverse. So while the West likes to present Iran as being, any negative attribute that you could think of, it has always been uh, uh, somehow linked to Iran. Whereas, whenever I had the opportunity of meeting academics who would come to Iran for conferences, they were always very surprised as to how different Iran was from what they thought it was through Western media, whether it's the BBC or CNN, or whether it's the Washington Post or the Guardian, doesn't matter. So there is I think, the very fact that, again, that Iran supports the Palestinian people, whereas others don't, I think, has woken many people up. And the fact that under such bombardments and under such brutal aggression, the Iranian people withstood this aggression, I think shows that the legitimacy of the state in the eyes of the people is very high. People do not rally around a flag that they do not consider to be legitimate. We saw Saddam Hussein fall very swiftly when the Americans invaded. But in the case of Iran, the United States got nowhere. And when the United States most probably attacks again, whether it tries to invade territory, invade islands, or take land, ultimately, I have no doubt that the U.S. forces will be expelled, and people will remain steadfast until the country is liberated and the aggressor is defeated and the occupiers are expelled. And I think, although it will be these are painful times, and they will continue to be painful in the days and weeks ahead, but I think in the long run, Iran will emerge much stronger, and people across the world will be looking to Iran to better understand what makes Iran tick, and what is it about Iran that makes it, Hezbollah, Ansarullah, the resistance, so insistent on standing up against the empire and supporting the oppressed people of Palestine.
Very good. Thank you so much, Professor Marandi. We're really grateful for your time, and we hope and pray for you, your family, and Iranian people. Truly appreciate it. Thank you so much for sharing your time and insight with us.
Thank you very much for inviting me.
And Dr. Marandi, we should let you go because you are so much in demand, but I can't let you go without asking one quick question. And that is, if, God forbid, there is another attack on Iran, are negotiations going to be off the table in the near future?
Yes, I think that will be the end of the negotiating process until the Iranians feel that the United States is that the Trump regime is being defeated, and that the Trump regime recognizes its defeat. Remember, during the 39 days of fighting, initially Trump demanded unconditional surrender, but by the end of the fighting, he accepted the Iranian 10-point plan as the framework for negotiations, and that was an admission of defeat. So Iran will make sure that the United States under Trump does not escape. The war is a terrible thing, and I've lived through multiple wars, and I do not want to see war, but it seems almost inevitable. But if it does happen, the Iranians are determined to fight this war in a way in which the United States never thinks about attacking Iran again in future. And so whenever Iran feels that we've reached that stage, then perhaps it will be willing to negotiate in order to bring an end to this, but there will be a lot that has to happen first before we get there.
Of course. Thank you so much again, Marandi. We are so grateful for your time and for giving us so much of it. Thank you. And please stay
Thank
safe.
you very much for having me. It was a great pleasure.
Thank you very much. Khuda Hafiz.
Thank you. Khuda Hafiz.